Hello, everybody. My name is Brock Young. As the Deputy Director for the San Francisco Federal Executive Board, we are one of 28 FEBs, all of which are located outside of DC in areas that have large concentrations of federal agencies and federal employees. Additionally, I am a retired veteran who participated in a federal skill bridge internship with the very agency I'm now Deputy Director of. As the Deputy Director of the SFFEB, I work to link senior agency officials and agencies with each other, building cooperative relationships at the local, state, and federal levels throughout Northern California, which is my area of responsibility. One of the things we do is assist agencies to find methods and ways to fill resource shortfalls, talent being one of them. One of the things we do is help agencies fill priority vacancies. To help accomplish that objective, I help qualified candidates, veterans, transitioning service members, and military spouses become more competitive when applying for those positions. All of you sitting here today are the talent pool federal agencies are looking for. In addition to offering this webinar, we facilitate the Veterans Federal Employment Collaborative, or VFEC, a national collaborative that focuses on connecting federal agencies and vacancies with qualified veterans and transitioning service members. The LinkedIn and Facebook groups will be shared at the end of this presentation for anyone interested in learning more. Before we get into the resume, for those interested in careers with Homeland Security investigation, you will see on the screen, this is a flyer for an upcoming job announcement due to hit USA Jobs on August 22nd. The agency is actively hiring, and this event is targeted specifically at women candidates. If you missed the links shown here, don't worry, they will be included again at the end of this presentation. Before we begin and get into the federal resume, I would like to first introduce Special Agent Eric Chin with Homeland Security Investigations. Eric, take it away.
Great. Brock, thank you so much for having me. And for everyone that's on the call, pleasure to meet you virtually. My name's Eric Chin. I'm a special agent with Homeland Security Investigations based in Seattle, Washington. And while I sit in Seattle, I'm really a representation of all of the HSI recruiters. So as much as we're able to assist you in how to make yourself more competitive from a resume writing standpoint, that's what we're here to help you with. If you'll note in the chat box, we do have a sample and an expired special agent job announcement. That is something that you could refer to when you're crafting your resume, and also something that as Brock goes through his presentation today, kind of keep in mind some of the things that are relevant to the special agent job, because those are the things that you're going to want to hit in your resume. I'm going to assume that at least a couple of you have been to the information session that was held this past Saturday. If not, a quick recap of Homeland Security Investigations is that we are the primary law enforcement agency responsible for things going in and out of the country. So anything that is trying to come in, whether it's something physical and tangible, such as a person, goods, merchandise, guns, drugs, money, those are kind of some of the things that we investigate. On the flip side, things that are going out of the country might be products that another country purchases. It could be commodities such as oil. It could be also money, guns, drugs, and so on and so forth. Another cool way to think about this job is that we also investigate things that are not tangible, such as cryptocurrencies, internet hitting switches across the country, intellectual property, so anything that really that can travel across the border, whether tangible, intangible, that's what we're really investigating. Brock here is, he's volunteering his time to do this webinar for you. So as much as possible, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them into the comment box or wait for the end of the presentation. And feel free also to ask very, personalized questions about your unique situation, because if you're experiencing it, I have a feeling that someone else is also going to be experiencing that. So, Brock, please feel free to take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Eric. And before we move on, a couple of points for those interested in applying for careers with HSI. We will get into each of these more in detail here soon. However, the agency does recommend you focus on your resume. For Homeland Security investigations, it can be no longer than 5 pages. Make sure you are clear and unmistakable when describing your your experience, and consider limiting your training and certifications to those that are current, relevant, and directly related to the position you're applying to. They recommend you prepare a separate list of professional and personal references to provide upon request, and make sure your resume reflects how, when, and where you have experience exercising initiative, having an attention to detail, making judgment in collecting and assembling and developing facts, evidence, or other pertinent data, the ability to analyze and evaluate data or evidence to arrive at sound conclusions, including applying new information, and the ability to partner with or lead others in the accomplishment of mission activities. Once you've done that, make sure you triple check your entire resume to ensure that you are clearly addressing all of the announcement and assessment questionnaires, questions, and requirements. But how? Well, that brings us to this webinar. Why? Because regular federal resumes won't get you interviews or the job. You're going to need more. You're going to need to put your resume on beast mode in order to set you apart from the hundreds, sometimes thousands of other applicants who are also applying to the position. This isn't even taking into account potential remote positions that may have thousands of applications, or the announcements close the same day that they are posted because they've reached their application quota. And yes, I'm dating myself with this animation. What we will cover. First, we're going to talk about what we won't be covering. Next, we will discuss the federal resume, dispel some myths, and cover a broad overview of the resume development process. Then we'll dive into building your federal resume. This will include sources you can and should get information from, different formats, required and optional sections, etc. Next, we will discuss what specialized experience, competencies, and the assessment questionnaire are and how to tailor your resume to them. We will then talk about methods of wordsmithing and adding context to your experience. Then we will go into translating your experience, which will be really important for our veterans and transition service members. Finally, we'll go over some closing tips and additional resources. Again, please hold your questions until given the opportunity to ask them. I don't want to miss something that you put into the comments section earlier in the presentation. I don't want to waste our time with things you already may know or things that already have excellent resources to answer. USA Jobs has a great series of videos explaining how to use the system, apply to jobs, as well as answer other questions you might have about the process. These links are to YouTube and the USA Jobs YouTube channel, and are some useful links, and the link to the USA Jobs YouTube channel will be provided at the end of the presentation. Before we get into the federal resume on how to write it, let's dispel some myths about the federal resume and the entire federal hiring process. The first myth is a big one that I frequently run into. That myth is a federal resume should not exceed 2 pages. This is absolutely false. A federal resume requires more information than a civilian resume, therefore is typically longer than 2 pages. We will go in depth on the things that should be included in your federal resume later in this presentation, but make sure you are paying attention to the announcement. Some agencies do have page limits, like HSI I mentioned earlier. Though for most applications, your resume needs to be as long as it needs to be in order to show you have the qualifications and experience the agency is looking for. Next myth, I must move to Washington, D.C. if I want to work for the federal government. Absolutely false. Only about 15% of the federal jobs and federal workforce are located in the Washington, D.C. metro area, while approximately 83% are found in multiple locations throughout the country, with the remaining 2% outside of the United States. Though, for full disclosure, some agencies would like you to move to D.C. for a time to do a rotation through their headquarters for development and promotion purposes. The next myth I run into a lot is resumes are scanned for keywords by the automated system. So USA Jobs says this is partially true, but experience and research tells me that real people, human resources specialists, will be the ones who review, rate, and score your resume. The only truly automated portion of the process is you filling out your USA Jobs information and the self-assessment. Another myth that's not on this list, but federal HR specialists will know what you did when you were in the military. Almost to a person, no, they will not. Veterans and transitioning service members need to translate their skills and experience into something civilian HR specialists understand. The next myth that I hear a lot, jobs that close before the closing date means the agency had someone in mind, which caveats to another myth, you have to know someone to get a federal job or be promoted in the federal system. Both of these are false. You do not need to know someone to get a federal job or be promoted. If you are qualified for a federal position, you can write a competitive federal resume. Make sure you add your knowledge, skills, and accomplishments into your resume and answer the questionnaire, giving yourself all of the credit you can. You have to apply correctly following the directions. You can get best qualified and referred to a supervisor without knowing anyone in the government. But networking, understanding the federal hiring process, asking for advice, getting your name out there is a way to ensure you're in the know when opportunities pop up. When a job announcement closes before the closing date, this typically means the agency received their limit of applications. Again, this happens when an agency knows they're going to be inundated with applications and there are only so many HR reviewers to go around. What other myths? Has anybody else heard another myth that they would like answered? No, no other myths? Want to raise their hand, come off mute? All right, just looking at a question we got here in the chat from Jocelyn. Where can we find the job info recording and also this recording? This recording will be published to the San Francisco Federal Executive Board YouTube channel as soon as it is over. Probably check back tomorrow. Moving on. First off, everything we will discuss here is a way of doing things. Like most things, there is no single the way to complete a federal resume, which does make it a little bit more difficult. This isn't to scare you, just manage expectations. Some agencies like longer resumes. Some require a resume of a certain length. Some like narratives instead of bullets, but most will accept either. What we will discuss today are best practices that have generally been shown to work. And by that, I mean, these are the practices that I use to have been hired by the federal government twice. Bottom line up front, your federal resume is your federal job application. It conveys your work history and experience to a potential employer. It is used to determine minimum qualifications as well as the best, most qualified candidates. It can be unlimited in length, again, unless specified by the agency, but a good rule to follow is that your federal resume needs to be as long as it needs to be in order for you to get the job. A federal resume must be tailored and written to the announcement and show specific and relevant accomplishments and information. Relevant equals experience, knowledge, skills, and training that applies to the job you're applying to. If it's not relevant, then leave it out. There's a reason this gets its own slide. I know that when I started this process, I included everything I did when I was in the service, no matter how small. While much of it was relevant, there was plenty that was not because of the career fields I was looking into. For instance, an agency won't care that I got my entire platoon to pass the physical fitness test at one point. What they would care about is how I did it and the competencies I demonstrated in accomplishing that goal. Planning, using computers to develop training, holding my employees accountable, finding ways to motivate them and demonstrating leadership, and ultimately achieving success. Again, the federal resume is your first and potentially only impression. Your resume is the best method to market yourself to a potential employer. It must show how you meet the minimum qualifications and must include examples of how, when, and where you use the competency or skill. If it's not in your resume, it doesn't matter. It is not how you think you meet the qualifications. It's how your resume articulates how you meet the qualifications. This is a big one. No one will assume what you did. You have to be clear about articulating what you did. And when developing your resume, don't go for the minimum qualifications. You want to shoot for either very highly qualified, which means exceeds minimum qualifications, or best qualified, which means substantially exceeds minimum qualifications. Again, the rule is if it's not in your resume, it doesn't count. Some things you shouldn't include in your resume include photographs or videos of yourself, or any sensitive information like PII, age, date of birth, marital status, PHI or protected health information, religious affiliation, social security number, etc. in your resume. This includes your LinkedIn or other social media profile URLs. If you include these, you may most likely will be removed from consideration. So where can you find information to put in your resume? For the veterans and or transitioning service members, in addition to your joint service transcript, you can also use your VMET or verification of military experience and training. Links will be included at the end of this presentation. Additional places to get information for your resume include annual performance evaluations, end of course evaluations, course syllabus, etc. And don't forget any awards you've received. Those should definitely go into your resume. Somebody raise your hand, raise your virtual hand, come off mute. Where are some other sources that you can find information for your resume? No one? Bueller? Bueller? All right, seeing none, moving on. Oh, I got a couple. All right, I'll go back. All right, we'll start with Christopher Linden. Go ahead.
Yeah, how about YouTube?
YouTube, awesome. That's a great place to find information on maybe job description, things like that. Jonathan Feliz, go ahead.
Yeah, so you can find out information depending on what branch of service. So, for example, for Marines, that would be through your fitness report. The Army would be through the NCOERs.
Good. Your evaluation, your performance evaluation is awesome. Don't forget previous job announcements, things like that. As discussed, one place to find excellent information is your joint service transcript. It explains in civilian terms what you did, where, and how. Here's an example from my own background in joint service transcript. And for those of you that are retired or have been out of the service for a while, I actually downloaded this. It was after I had actually gotten out of the service and retired. So you should still have access to it. Like Jonathan said, evaluations are a great place to find achievements, but for those of you with military experience, you have to be sure to rewrite your experiences in civilian terms. Civilian and military course completion certificates and 1059s are also great places. They will typically include the skills, tasks, and competencies you were required to demonstrate in order to graduate. If you attended a course and that course required you to demonstrate certain competencies in order to graduate, make sure to put those competencies in your resume. Don't forget to include any experience you might have in leadership roles in social or civic organizations, volunteer or other unpaid experiences, projects with your local schools or programs like 4-H, the FFA, or your child's booster clubs, projects like speaking engagements, or if you have writing credits. And don't forget any professional academic challenges or successes you had while either in college or high school. I'll level with you. I don't like the USA Jobs resume builder because it's not as flexible as using a Word file. There are a bunch of templates out there if you look online. The biggest thing to consider when deciding what format to use is find a format that allows you to best convey your information. Marilyn, I see your hand. It'll be 1 second. If you still need one, feel free to reach out to me following this webinar, and I'll send you the format that I use and recommend. Up front, federal resumes do not need to be flashy and shouldn't have any cells, text boxes, colors, or tables. These can actually take away from what you're trying to convey, and that is your experience. Federal resume should be written in black, 11 to 12 point Arial, Times, or Times New Roman or Garamond font. Again, there should be no text boxes, tables, colored boxes, etc. in your federal resume. Finally, read the fine print. Some agencies have different requirements like page length limitations if they accept non-USA job system resumes, date formats, etc. Always read the entire announcement. Marilyn, go ahead.
Yeah, I had always heard that like the resume builder was always the preferred way because you could just apply to the USA Jobs announcement directly. So, and I know you can store up to like 5 documents under your profile. So would it be best to just not use the resume builder and upload the document instead? Is that what you're saying?
That is my recommended course of action, and that is what I do personally. I create, and we'll get into more of this. We'll get into this more in a little bit. I create a single master resume using a Word file that allows me to adjust, adapt, and tailor my resume down to only include relevant information to any job I am applying to. The problem with the USA Jobs Resume Builder, it hits all the big points. I love it, but it has some limitations. Using the Resume Jobs Resume Builder, for instance, you're only able to pick month and year for your dates to and from. The problem is, if you read some job announcements, they want to see month, day, year, and if you don't have all 3, they will remove you from consideration. There are some other points that I will discuss later on.
Okay, thank you. That makes sense. Thank you so
Not a
much.
problem. I saw one more hand. It said Justice League. You still got a question?
That would have been me. Name's Audrey. I'm not sure why it's under the league. I was part of it, but either way. I had a question about font. You said black, Arial, Times New Roman, all that stuff that's on the screen. What about italicized and bold to kind of change like title wise? Is that okay? Or changing from 11 to 12? If you're like talking about work experience, put that in 12, and then underneath the work experience is an 11-point font.
100% yes, that is absolutely something I recommend doing, and we will discuss that here soon.
Lovely. Awesome. Thank you.
All right, the biggies. Building your federal resume. A federal resume must include the following: contact information, I also call the introduction, work experience, education, volunteer experience if applicable, academic awards, achievements, and memberships, as well as references. I always recommend to add at least 3, and we'll get into why later on. A federal resume should also include relevant professional training. This training should include the name, location, city, and state, sponsor organization, start and end dates, and at least month and year, as well as the number of hours. Certifications should include granting organization, location, city, and state, dates the certification is in effect, and earned. Again, month and year at a minimum. Military schools should include organization and location, dates completed or graduated, as well as a short summary of what you learned, the skills, competencies, etc. Ultimately, the why this agency should care you went to this military school. Getting into the contact information or introduction section, needs to be your full name as listed on your records, your address. Be advised, some agencies do consider full street address, PII. So I recommend only including your city and state, or make sure you read the entire announcement to make sure you're including everything the agency wants and nothing they don't. You will need a telephone number for them to be able to call you, as well as a professional or personal email. I don't recommend using .mil or .edu if you have them, just because it's easier to maintain and keep track of all your job applications, but make sure you have something that looks professional. The two emails you see on screen are actually email addresses that I pulled from people from some resume reviews. So you don't want 420 Sergeant Rock rules being there in the hiring manager's desk when he has to email you to see if you want the job. As an example, this is my introduction section. You see here that I hit all of the requirements, but also put my own shine on things with the job number and title of the position I'm applying for. This requires me to change at least one thing on every resume that I submit. For those of you new to the federal hiring system, there are many special hiring authorities that you can use that can give you a head start when applying. For veterans, when it comes to your resume, veterans preference and special hiring authorities are two separate things and serve two different purposes. Veterans preference gives eligible veterans preference and appointment over many other applicants. In the competitive service, which is what the federal system is, when agencies use a numerical rating and ranking system to determine the best qualified applicants for a position, an additional 5 or 10 points are added to the numerical score of qualified preference eligible veterans. Veterans preference does not guarantee veterans a job, and it does not apply to internal agency actions such as promotions, transfers, reassignments, and reinstatements. Special hiring authorities, also known as hiring paths, help the federal government hire individuals that represent our diverse society. SHAs include veteran-specific paths like the Veterans Recruitment Appointment, or VRA, as well as the 30% or more disabled veteran hiring authority, as well as other hiring authorities for recent graduates, individuals with disabilities, or Schedule A hiring authority, as well as Peace Corps and AmeriCorps alumni. Special hiring authorities are also known as non-competitive hiring authorities. This means that anyone who meets the minimum qualifications and eligibility for the position can be selected so long as they qualify for one of the applicable hiring authorities. The Veterans Federal Employment Collaboratives helped more than 50 people get hired to positions that did not even have open announcements on USA Jobs, using the individual with disabilities and the 30% or more disabled veteran hiring authorities. Language proficiency levels are good to include if relevant to the position you are applying for. Current and active duty clearances aren't that important for the federal government, since nearly every agency will reinvestigate you as part of their onboarding process. Including your clearance and adjudication date shows the agency that they shouldn't have any issues when and if you are reinvestigated by their organization. Again, make sure you read the entire announcement and the fine print and include everything they want to see and nothing they don't. All right, Marilyn, I see a hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, about the veterans preference. So I think I saw a post that you put on LinkedIn about VR, was it VREA? Can you expound on that a little bit more? Because that is kind of confusing.
REA, not sure.
The veteran, what do you call it?
Veterans Equal Opportunity Act, VEOA.
Yes, thank you.
No worries. So
I've got a brain fart. Okay.
There's actually two, Brock. There's VRA and VEOA, and I'll put them in the chat.
Yeah. Okay. So yes, Maryland, the VRA is a great general special hiring authority that taps out at GS11. So GS11 positions and below, and that is a standard kind of a general special hiring authority for all veterans. The VEOA is less a special hiring authority rather than it is a it's granting you, me, everybody here that's a veteran or transitioning service member, the opportunity to apply to federal jobs that are only open to current federal employees. For the purposes of federal hiring, military service does not count as federal service. So the VEOA basically puts transitioning service members and veterans on the same even playing field as current federal employees. Does that make sense?
Oh, yes. Okay. Thank you. Yes, that makes sense. Thank you so much.
And that is also one of the problems with it, is that almost every person who meets the minimum qualifications using the VEOA will be referred to the hiring manager, no matter if your resume is garbage or not. So just be advised, just because you're referred to the hiring manager, if you're referred often referred to the hiring manager, have been using the VEOA and haven't been getting interviews, it's your resume. Bottom line.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Mhm.
Sorry, I don't know. Can you guys hear me?
Go ahead. Yes.
Hey, Brock. First off, you're a rock star. Thanks for putting this on. So that kind of confused me a little bit. Is that separate from the 30% or more disability?
They are
veterans
they are
preference?
all set. They are all separate. They are
Okay.
separate hiring paths. So the VEOA allows you to compete, allows you to apply to jobs that are only open to current federal employees.
Got it.
So if you see here on the screen, you got the little federal employees with the little castle looking thing.
Yep, all separate, and it'll say that in the job posting, I'm assuming, right? Probably.
It does, yes.
Okay, or job announcement
So-
number. Got it.
Yeah, so for those of you on the call who are 30% or more disabled, here's a little tidbit and here's a little bit of awesome for you. If you are more than 30% or disabled from the Department of Veterans Affairs, you're probably also eligible for the Schedule A hiring authority, which is the individual with disabilities, which has absolutely nothing to do with your service. It has to do with your disabilities or conditions. So it's a great hiring authority also. So I want to pass it along to Dr. Jenkins. Go ahead.
Hey, Brock, I just put that in the chat. So if anyone wants further information and wants to keep a hold of that information and read it later, it's there. It goes over Schedule A and it goes over the Veterans Recruitment Appointment, Veterans Employment Opportunity Act, 30% or more disabled veterans enrolled in a TA training program. So it's all there for you.
Awesome, Mr. Jenkins. I appreciate that. Thank you. All
I
right,
just
moving on.
wanna, can
Go ahead.
I say something? The website that just got posted, is not working. When you click on those, links, it says not file, not on file or something like that. It said not found. There you go. Not found. For Jenkins,
Yeah, mine
Yes,
works.
let me work on that.
Mine
So
does
yeah, I
work,
just
so,
seen
yeah.
that. It pulled me to the regular one from OPM, but I'll work on that. I'll get it back in there.
Okay. When in doubt, Google it. Not to be short, but if you do a quick web search, usually putting OPM, veterans preference, USA Jobs, veterans preference, that's normally that's how I usually bring it up if I've got questions or I need to confirm something. All right, moving on. For the veterans in the audience, it is a myth that military and civilian experience are different. All professional work experience is experience. This includes part-time and unpaid experiences as well. You want to express that you have the specialized experience the agency is looking for. Saying that the experience was gained in the quote-unquote military makes them think your experience is limited only to that. You want the agency to know that you have the experience they're looking for. Where you got it doesn't matter. As we see here, I recommend utilizing the reverse chronological resume, beginning with your current position and working backwards. Your federal resume should cover the last 10 years of work experience, but this is only a recommendation. If you can write a resume that's shorter than 10 years, or because maybe high school, make sure you include any jobs or volunteer activities that you participated in. If you need to go back farther than 10 years to show you have the qualifications, do so. Your resume can be in bullet or narrative format. You need to figure out what is the best way for you to convey your experience to the hiring manager. Don't forget to include any part-time or unpaid experiences that might overlap with your full-time work. This is especially important when your part-time gig required you to demonstrate vastly different skills and competencies than your full-time job. You want to get credit for what you did, and again, if it's not in your resume, it didn't happen. When developing your federal resume, each professional experience must include a job title. For the military veterans out there, civilians won't know what a sergeant major or NCOIC, watch NCO, petty officer, or staff sergeant is. Try first line supervisor, senior instructor, organizational administrative and logistics manager. Sorry, brain fart. Next, you want the employer's name. For the military and veterans out there, this will be the only part that you can and should use military terms because that's who you worked for. For instance, 1002nd Transportation Company, Naval Facilities Engineering Systems Commander, NAVFAC, Bravo 152nd General Support Aviation Battalion, etc. Dates. Again, back to what we discussed earlier, USA Jobs Resume Builder will only allow you to put month and year, but some agencies want month, day, and year and will toss your resume if you don't have them. Finally, you want to include your supervisor's name and phone number, but don't be afraid to put no as to whether or not the agency can contact your supervisor, but be prepared to answer why. I have also seen contact me first or other information regarding the individual's retired status, or just unable to get in contact. Using this example from my own resume, as a federal employee, I include both my pay band, series, grade, and step, as well as my salary, so it looks the same as the rest of my experience blocks. Since this is a federal position, I make sure to include this is a federal position statement. Again, for the purposes of federal resumes, military service and government contracting positions are not considered federal positions. Another example from my resume, this one here, I was active duty. So notice that I don't have, this is a federal position. That is because even though you might be or have been on active duty, you're not considered a federal employee when it comes to federal hiring. This example shows how you can add part-time or reservist or National Guard positions that run concurrent with your full-time job. Remember, the salary and hours information here are considered typical and should be an average of the hours per week you work and pay. For this example, since I was AGR or Active Guard Reserve, I also had a part-time National Guard position with duties and responsibilities far different than my full-time position. Because I was active duty, I didn't get paid for my end-day job. So I show that by including unpaid in the salary section. For those who have been activated, put on orders, or for an extended period of time, etc., I recommend you include those as achievements within your experience or completely separate experience sections if more than 9 months. I do see a question. So Marilyn, go ahead, and then Caitlin, you're next.
Yes. So about the, I noticed that you have like company commander, 03 position, GS-12 equivalent. I always thought that you had to list the series as well. Like the equivalent of series, like, if you're a secretary 0318, and then, your GS-5, like, so
That sounds like an awesome thing. If you want to do that in your resume, I may actually kind of look at that myself, just because. However, so yeah, that's an awesome idea. And if that works in your resume, rock it. I actually kind of like that idea. I'm gonna have to check that out myself just to see if that works. However, on here, so 2 things about here. Company commander is actually a mistake. I've since changed that in my federal resume. So no one knows what a company commander is. So the So the 03 position GS-12 equivalent, there's a comptroller document that was posted, I think in early 2000s, that was one of the only official documents I've ever read that has similar equivalency for GS levels to military service levels. So as an officer at the time in this picture, it was a GS-12 equivalent. Okay, cool. However, and that's a great way to help, I'm finger quoting, like you can see it, help the HR manager kind of see, okay, I don't know what military stuff is, but I see, to allow them the opportunity to kind of see, okay, is this actually that equivalent? Be careful utilizing this kind of technique, though, and I can share that page with you if you email me or connect with me on LinkedIn. However, I will say this, be careful using this trick if, for instance, you're maybe a staff sergeant or an E6, because that's only equivalent to a GS6. And if you're saying, oh, I've got GS6 equivalent time, but I'm applying for a GS11 job, that's going to cause you issues, which we will get more into later on.
Gotcha. Okay, so my second question is, if you know, I've always been like at a GS5 level. So if I wanted to jump to like a GS7 or an 8, you know, how would I relate that in terms of like my experience being from the military if I was like an E4?
Honestly, we're going to get into that later, but I will tell you right now, I've met E4s and I've helped E4s tweak their resume, and they've come out of the service getting GS13 jobs, and I helped
Oh,
an
wow.
05 who just couldn't figure it out. He topped out at GS11.
Oh, wow.
So it's not about your rank. It's not about your pay grade. It's about what you did and how you articulate that in your resume.
Gotcha.
Uh,
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Caitlin, go ahead. Caitlin. All right. Well, we will go back to Caitlin when we check next. Before we get into detail on methods of writing quality experience bullets, let's talk some generalities. Solid federal resumes are about three things: detail, detail, and detail. Your experiences need to include examples of what you managed, did, and or tasks you completed, not what you were responsible for or assisted with. Your resume needs to describe the scope of your duties, how many employees you supervised, how much money you managed, were you a decision maker, all including examples. It should include examples of your accomplishments, awards, and recognition you earned, as well as details and a summary of why you earned them. Make sure you use quantifiable metrics whenever possible. For instance, improved X% by Y% within C months. What's the word I've used there a couple times? That's right, examples. If you're not going to give examples of how, where, when you used a competency or skill, you might as well not even include that competency or skill in your resume. Bottom line up front, nothing you include in a list of skills or in your summary or objective statement will count towards assessing your qualifications. Even though many templates and examples you have seen have lists of skills, competencies, and or achievements, don't think you're going to be able to hit the easy button and put all of the required competencies in one of these lists and have it count towards your qualifications. Even if you're using one of these templates, make sure you're including and mentioning everything you have in these sections in your experience section with examples, metrics, etc. Describe how you use the programmer skill, in what environment, how often, if you were considered an expert or not. Did people come to you for advice on these matters or competencies? Were the reports you wrote for managers or senior executives? Were those reports used to make decisions, etc.? Again, anything you put into one of these lists or summaries will not count towards your experience and qualifications. And I see Caitlin is back. Go ahead, Caitlin.
Hey, sorry, technical difficulties. Just a quick question for you. When you were talking about the tenure with your job application, like just for your resume for having like 10 years of experience, if it's something not relevant, do you still recommend putting it even though it's like the shows that you've been employed for 10 years, or do you just not include it because it's not relevant at all?
All experience is relevant, even if it's just saying that you were employed over that time.
Okay.
So you want to make sure there's no questions about your employment status. There's no questions of, yes, you were good to go. You know, you're completely employed the entire time. Maybe the stuff you did at that job didn't apply, but I'd guarantee almost to a job, there's definitely something somehow that you can add to put a couple bullets in there that'll strengthen your overall resume.
Awesome. Thank you.
Up front, you need to think of your federal resume as a test, the first of several challenges you need to overcome in order to become a federal employee. Every test has questions, and understanding those questions can be key to passing or failing. For federal resumes, the test questions are made up of specialized experience, competencies, required training if applicable, and the assessment questionnaire. First, without the requisite specialized experience as defined in the announcement, it is unlikely that your application will be considered best qualified and referred to the hiring manager. The book definition of specialized experience is a type of work experience that is directly related to and relevant to the position for which you are applying. Next, sections in the job announcement that refer to how you will be qualified and evaluation factors and competencies are telling you the metrics that the agency are going to use to grade your resume. When grading, the agency will determine how well your resume describes how, when, how often you have used the competencies the agency is looking for. Next, you need to ensure you have any required courses or training, again, if applicable. This section includes any special or specific schooling, education course requirements, and certifications. Finally, the assessment questionnaire selections you make are to accurately describe your training and experience carrying out the task. We are going to go into each of these in detail. First of all, dates. In the federal government, 52 weeks is an important benchmark. For Fed HR folks, 52 weeks of experience equals 52 35 to 40-hour work weeks. This is why the reviewing HR professional needs to know your employment dates, your exact employment dates. Don't think you're getting away with anything by only putting the month and year for your employment dates. For instance, by putting January 2020 to December 2020 on your resume, you will not get assessed at 52 weeks. You will get assessed at 44. Why? Because federal HR personnel default your start date to the last date of the month and your end date to the first. So by putting January 2020 to December 2020, you are basically putting down January 31st, 2020 to December 1st, 2020, which equals 44 weeks. Even if you left mid-month, you want to get credit for the time you worked. Now, I've had many questions about how accurate do you need to be if you're not sure. Best guess is my recommendation. Don't lie, don't go harder if you can, but just be close enough. They're not going to go over your resume with a fine-tooth comb and put orders to dates. Next, let's talk about the hours worked per week. In order for you to be assessed as having 52 weeks time and grade or 52 weeks of experience, the federal HR specialist needs to know how many hours a week you work. Again, for the federal government has determined full-time means 35 to 40 hours a week. Putting anything less and your experience won't be graded as full-time. But what about more than 40 hours a week? If your normal duties require you to work more than 40 hours a week, say so. But say it is an achievement, not a normal thing. Why? Because we understand that you may have worked 60 hours a week, but what were you scheduled to work? If under 60, put what you should have been working and then put as a bullet how you routinely worked additional hours in order to ensure the success of the organization's mission. Back to the example. What if you don't have 52 weeks of experience like in the first example? Here we see the first example, and the applicant will only get credit for 24 weeks of experience, but needs 52 weeks of experience in one of the specialized experiences on the announcement they are applying to. For many of us, military veterans or not, we often do similar things in every job. You may have conducted quarterly performance evaluations in multiple positions, or maybe use certain management skills, technical or computer skills, report writing, etc. It's important to include what you did in every experience that you did it. It doesn't matter if you duplicate the experience bullets or not, if you did it. If you did something in more than one experience period, include it in both. By including conducted quarterly performance evaluations in both positions shown on the screen, this resume would get assessed as having 104 weeks of experience in conducting quarterly performance evaluations. If you're shooting for more than just meeting the minimum qualifications, this is how you do it. Oh. Did I just go back one? I did. Sorry about that. Any questions? Seeing none, awesome. Moving on. But how do you locate the specialized experience within the announcement? Most USA Jobs webinars and classes will explain what is meant by specialized experience, so I'm not going to go too in depth on this one. Here, we see examples from this particular announcement. Take a look at the first line on the page. You must have 1 year of specialized experience or equivalent to at least the next lower grade, in this case, GS11. This means your resume must not only show you have the experience that the agency is looking at in the grade you're applying to, but also must show you would have met the time and grade requirements for the next lower grade. How do you make sure you're meeting this requirement? By ensuring your entire resume, to include past positions, is tailored to the announcement. Neglecting this is the reason most people receive those do not meet minimum requirements for this position emails. I'll discuss this more in a moment. Remember the first required specialized experience? You must have 1 year of specialized experience at the level of difficulty and responsibility equivalent to the GS11 grade level in the federal service. This is where most people get derailed because they spend all of their time writing to the current position or the position that the announcement the announcement position, and then neglecting to ensure all of their past positions show the applicable growth and qualifications required by the announcement. Many announcements will lay out what experience at the next lower level looks like, but many don't. This means researching what experience looks like at the next lower level. OPM, or the Office of Personnel Management, has an entire library on competencies and skills at various levels and within certain job series. You can also gain insight from looking at lower level positions within the same agency and job series on USA Jobs. The slide here shows a short example of how to show progression in your resume. Okay, but how do we tailor? Well, let's take the specialized experience preparing presentations, white papers, and reports for personnel of all levels. Now, everybody take a moment, think about your own work experience. Does anybody want to give me an example of a potential resume bullet or a resume bullet that they currently use? All right, no takers. All right. Well, how about this one?
Are you saying any bullet that we use?
Well, it was more coming up with one real quick for this specific requirement.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
No worries. So from this example, we see the applicant addressed preparing presentations, how often they did it, as well as the levels that they presented to. The applicant explained what systems or applications they used, as well as how they both wrote and verbally briefed the information. From this bullet, I see the person has technical competence, experience with oral and written communication, experience using Microsoft Office products, as well as experience speaking to employees, managers, and executives. There is something very important missing. What is it? This example, oh, there we go. Go ahead, Marilyn.
Quantifiable metrics.
There you go. Good job. This example bullet is purposely missing quantifiable metrics. What was improved by all of this? How much? How long did it take? This bullet is missing the so what of why it was included in the resume. Next, we will discuss how your resume will be graded. Reading through the announcement, you are told something to the effect of, you will be evaluated on the basis of your level of competency in the following areas. These areas are also called competencies. Most announcements will be different, so these 4 competencies are only examples. Based on these competencies, what is the announcement looking for? What do they mean? Well, OPM lists the definitions of their competencies in the multi-purpose occupational systems analysis inventory closed-ended mosaic competencies list. A link will be included at the end of this presentation. Using the mosaic, you will find the meaning of the competencies that you will be graded against. so that you can use those definitions to help write your experience bullets and narratives. I am a fan of this. Every federal agency, all of their applications, all of their announcements, all have the same definitions. So it's just one of the a few things the federal government has, in my opinion, done right as far as federal hiring. Looking at this competency, problem solving. For this competency, the Mosaic Guide lists the definition as identifies problems, determines accuracy and relevance of information, uses sound judgment to generate and evaluate alternatives, and to make recommendations. Think about your own life. Think about your own experience. What could a bullet look like? Do we have any brave takers? No? That's okay. I've done the work for you. Here, our imaginary applicant has included evaluated business practices, processes devoted to scheduling, as well as an analysis of workflows, value-added, impact, and utility drive from cost-benefit analysis. Coordinated with regional IT team, provided guidance and directed development of a regional scheduling system for scheduling of 3 HSDP 12 sites across California. Result, increase in customer service, receiving no negative customer service experience, CSX comments while in the position. And the scheduling system has been adopted by 2 other EPA regions. Does our bullet match what the competency is looking for? Remember, the competency of problem solving was identifies problems, determines accuracy and relevance of information, uses sound judgment to generate and evaluate alternatives, and to make recommendations. So anybody thinks this does not hit that? All right, before we move on, let's take a quick pause. Are there any questions about competencies? I know we're drinking from a fire hose here, so it's kind of can be overwhelming. All right, seeing no questions, I have exactly 5 o'clock. We are halfway through our slides. I would like to take a 5-minute break. So I have, again, 5 o'clock p.m. Pacific, and that's my actual alarm telling me to take a break. So we will take a quick 5-minute break. We will be back at 5:05, at which point we will move on and start actually diving into the assessment questionnaire and why that it is important. I will see you back in 5. Still got 3 minutes, but if anybody had any questions or needed to ask me something, go ahead and feel free to come off mute.
I jumped into this meeting late because I had the wrong link. Am I able to get your email so I can, when I'm finished with my resume, I can send it to you for your advice?
Absolutely. In fact, I will have a full contact information on the very last slide.
Awesome. Thank you.
So yeah, it's kind of make sure you have to sit through the entire thing.
Right. Thank you.
So, Brock, I have a question. I saw that in the last slide, you put in results. So, um, I so instead of, I guess what I'm trying to ask is, if you don't have a quantifiable result, and like if you don't remember how much you saved your organization from, you know, make, making your process improvements, how would you quantify that with, if you don't if you don't have numbers like percentages, for example?
So again, everything we're talking about here is a way of doing things. If that's all you have and that's all you can do, just, you accomplish the mission. Did you accomplish your goal? Yes. Is that perfect? Is that accomplish your goal in X number of time when it should have taken X number, Y number of time? No, it's a little bit, it's less. Yeah. Ultimately, you want to get credit for what you did and what you remember. So you definitely want to put something. If you can't go as in depth as you should, or as you would like to, sometimes life sucks. Just to be completely honest. So you do the best you can is what I'd recommend.
Okay.
Just do the best you can. Make sure you're doing, you have the information that the announcement is looking for. Add as much context and detail as you can, and ultimately keep applying until you get a job, and then keep applying until you get your perfect dream job.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Out of respect for everybody's time, it is now 5:05, so we're going to get back to moving. All right. Moving on to the assessment questionnaire. Assessment questionnaires measure your expertise in job-related tasks and are used to screen and evaluate applicants. This assessment allows candidates to self-identify their relevant experience. These self-report questions are carefully developed to identify specific behaviors, education, and experience that will separate good candidates from great ones. Most announcements will include a link at the bottom that allows you to preview the assessment questions prior to applying. All right. These are a couple of examples of how you preview the assessment questionnaire. Up front, most assessment questionnaires are different. What we will go over here is an example taken from USA Jobs. And here's an example of what some of the questions you'll be answering look like. Remember what I said about a test? Another example of a format you may find. This example requires you to select everything you have experience with that is applicable to the job you're applying for. If you select something, guess where else that information needs to be? That's right, your resume. There are several other ways that the assessment questionnaire will ask about your experience. Some will ask you to input examples, other will ask for dates and job titles. Remember, you have to include everything the announcement and assessment questionnaire are looking for in your resume. Assessment questionnaires are also called self-assessments. This is where you get to select how well you think you qualify for the job. By a quick show of virtual hands, who has heard that no matter what, you should always choose expert or the highest rating possible? Okay, we got one. Got a bunch. All right. So, yeah. Well, that's a myth. Big old myth. Fact. If you inflate your qualifications and or experience, which means your resume doesn't support your answers, you may be removed from consideration for the position. At a minimum, your self-assessment score will be downgraded and your resume may be put at the back of the pile. So make sure you rate yourself accurately and honestly. David Gonzalez, you have a hand up. Nope.
No, yeah, it was for the previous question you asked, sorry.
No worries. All right, from here, we're going to go over an example of what should be reflected in your resume based on your self-assessment selection. This isn't the only way to do it, nor is this the only format the questions come in. Bottom line, no matter what the assessment questionnaire is asking for, your resume must reflect the answer you select. So let's think about this question. Researching, analyzing, and developing reports, data tools, and providing training and leadership. Based on this question, let's see what your resume should look like based on potential answers. For this format of assessment questionnaire question, you have 5 choices. We've seen them all. A, I have not had education, training, or experience in performing this task. B, I've had education or training, blah, blah, blah. C, I've performed this task on the job under close supervision. D, I perform this task as a regular part of my job, independently and usually without review by a supervisor. And E, this task has been a major part of my work. I am highly skilled at performing this task, and I have been supervised or trained, or I have supervised or trained others in the performance of this task, or others have consulted me as an expert for assistance. All right. So if you selected A for this one's easy. If you don't have training, your resume won't have any information in it. If you select B, example resume bullet could read like this. From this example, we see the person has training, but they don't say where they've used it, how they used it, where they got it, in what environment, etc. Now we're getting more information from the resume bullet. Here we can see that the person has some experience, but not a ton. Don't be afraid to pick this one if it's accurate. Here we have even more detail and more context. Finally, the expert. How do you think this bullet could read? How about this? Notice that the examples are getting longer and longer. That's what detail and context looks like. For this example, I left out some things that could make the bullet even stronger. What could be added to give it more weight?
Metrics impact.
There you go. The so what? Why did I include this? Why did I include this? Very good. I don't know how better to foot stomp this other than this. If you're not sure about what to select, select the next lower choice. That way, if the HR reviewer sees you are more qualified, they can increase your self-rating without harm to you. If you select something and it turns out that it was too low and you self-selected out of running, then maybe the job may not have been meant for you. Now that we've got an idea of what we're talking about, let's dive into how to make sure we're clearly detailing our experience and hitting the announcement requirements. The experiences and examples in your federal resume need to paint a clear picture about how, when, and where you gain the experience and meet the qualifications the announcement is looking for. When writing out your experience, think implied versus specified. The best answer is you must specify everything, even the things you believe are in the implied category. What do I mean by implied versus specified? Let's look at the example of taking out the garbage. Specified task, take out the garbage. Implied with that, would be to remove the bag from the bin, walk to the front door, open the front door, walk to the garbage can, open the garbage can, put the bag in the garbage can, close the lid, return to the house, closing the front door, replacing bag in bin. If you've got kids, you know this is a multi-step task that they normally always forget that last step. So when describing what you did, you should be as clear and detailed as possible. And don't just include how, when, and where, but also the skills used. Maybe you used a skill set such as verbal communication that you used while being responsible for directing incoming phone calls or stepping in to represent your supervisor. Written communication examples should state that you have written skills that include, for example, any communications sent, as well as what systems, applications, or software you used. Don't just describe what you did as a duty or responsibility, but also if you used Microsoft Suite Office products or software such as Excel, PowerPoint, and spreadsheets. Answer how often you used it. For our veterans and transitioning service members out there, writing in civilian language means avoiding militarisms or jargon. Private companies and federal agencies don't have NCOICs, petty officers, sergeants major, platoons, ships, or brigades. For current federal employees, it's important to avoid agency or office-specific jargon when you're applying to another office or agency. This means you also need to translate those things to something HR reviewers and managers within the other agency understand. I've stated it before and will again several more times. You want the agency to know your experience is experience. Where you got it doesn't matter. This is the same with acronyms. Use them sparingly, if at all, and always spell them out at least once. Finally, when it comes to numbers, I recommend either spelling out or writing out all the zeros. For instance, 35 million with 6 zeros has more of a wow effect than just 35M. When defining your role, state the facts. Did you work on your own as part of a team, as a supervisor? Did you assist with other functions? What were they? Did you manage supervisors? Go beyond listing your job responsibilities by using accomplishments and examples to highlight the results of your work experience. Again, avoid jargon when describing your duties. Use civilian terms when describing your organization. Instead of brigade, try an organization of over 2,000 personnel, or use terms like agencies, directorates, or offices. Always avoid military-only organization titles like battalions, squadrons, or wings. When developing your experience bullets, you also want to avoid terms like helped, worked, assisted with, I have experience with. Instead, clearly explain what you did, what tasks you completed, and what were those tasks key to the successful completion of the mission. Did you improve anything, change anything, better anything? What specific skills, abilities, and/or attributes did you employ to complete the task? What equipment or software did you use? You need context and detail. Avoid terms like responsible for or served as. Instead of responsible for, try managed or completed X tasks or similar action verbs that embody initiative. Don't just say major duties include or currently I am working on. State clearly what you did, X, Y, Z. Did I mention you need to avoid jargon when describing what you did? When developing your resume, it should, when developing a resume, it should reflect clearly the professional level you worked at. It should paint a clear picture whether or not you were a doer or a policymaker. Your bullets and narratives need to show you have entry, middle, senior, or executive level experience, depending on the announcement. A good way to format your bullets and narratives to help add context is to use either the PAR, STAR, or CCAR methods as a template. Doing this not only gives you a strong format for your experience, but it will also give you practice for your interviews, where it is strongly recommended that you format your interview responses using the PAR or STAR methods. Now, a quick note, the CCAR method is recommended format for senior or SES resumes. We're not going to go over that format here. So let's start with the PAR method, PAR. Problem, situation. This sets the context. Action, what you did, what steps you took, and the result. What are the numbers? What are the metrics? This is an example of using the PAR method to develop a resume bullet. The STAR method is also the recommended method for answering the behavioral interview questions you will face during your eventual interview. So you're thinking positive. It's a good habit to start writing and speaking in those terms now. STAR, situation, background, the task or problem to solve, goal to reach, task completed or the skills used. Action, this is what you did, the steps you took. Explain the process. Finally, the results. Now, results also include how you contributed, how you benefited or your agency benefited, how you improved your organization, the process, or important lessons learned or skills gained through the outcome. This is an example of using the STAR method to develop your resume bullet. Again, we will save the CCAR method for another class, but you can search out examples of the CCAR method on the web if you'd like to know more. All right, before we move on, do we have any questions on using the PAR or STAR methods to help develop your resume bullet? Ultimately, let me just say, these are not hard line recommendations. You don't have to do STAR, but trying to stick and trying to write all of your resume bullets as close to the STAR or the PAR method helps you in the long run. So any questions regarding those two methods? Oh, never mind my PAR comment. We lost you on audio. Gotcha. Okay, so no questions on the PAR or STAR methods on how to develop your resume bullet. Excellent. Next, I strongly recommend listing college education, military education, certifications, and other trainings separately. Pay attention to the announcement. Understand whether or not education will be a major factor or not in being determined as qualified. Don't shortchange yourself because you may not have a full degree yet. Many jobs are looking for experience and transferable skills that are communicated in your resume. Although it is always good to address education on your resume, you need to be conscientious and conscious about whether that will be a deciding factor or not, so you don't have to be as detailed with your with your education as if it's not that important. Volunteer experience is an important section and can add a lot to your resume. Volunteer experience includes any unpaid experience you might have. It can include work done through national service programs such as the Peace Corps or AmeriCorps, or work for other community-based philanthropic and social organizations like churches, schools, etc. Now, I want to make a statement here about churches. In the beginning, I made it clear that you need to avoid inferring that of your religious beliefs or religious standing. However, including that maybe you work for a Catholic and volunteer for a Catholic school food drive, that is not stating you're a Catholic. That is just stating you work for the food drive. So does that make sense for those of you that may have religious affiliations that you don't feel like you want to include on your resume, but you do have extensive volunteer experience within those organizations? I know it is a thin line, but it is a very clear and recognized line. All right, moving on. Make sure you also include involvement in programs like the FFA or 4-H, or if your child's school has a booster club. Volunteer experience can show critical competencies, knowledge, and skills you might have beyond your professional experience. Again, make sure that it's relevant and make sure that you include all valuable training and experience that translates directly to your resume and the announcement you're applying to. When adding your volunteer experience, you need the name of the organization and location, exact dates for each period, number of hours worked per week, brief description of duties, and identify your major roles, responsibilities, and accomplishments. This all kind of looks familiar, right? That's because volunteer experience is experience. I've also seen separate sections for affiliations as well. If you are affiliated with an organization out there, I encourage you to list in this section, your volunteer section, and include everything you've done for them. Award sections are good to include if you have the room, but make sure you include a statement about any awards or decorations in your experience. This will give the experience more context and detail and push your resume beyond just meeting the minimum qualifications. You need a minimum of 3 professional references. That's it. That's the slide. Now, some agencies, I know HSI will say upon whatever, upon demand or when requested. I recommend, based on conversations with several HR managers and hiring managers, by including your 3 references, if your resume wants to go past the initial stages, they don't have to wait for you to send them your references. They have it on hand. I understand that it might only be the difference of a couple hours or a day or two, but because the federal hiring process is already so long, finding ways to shave off days can, matter in the long run. For our veterans and transitioning service members on the call, the SFFEB's military to civilian translation guide is available on LinkedIn and Facebook. If you can't find it or would like to contribute, feel free to email me and I will email you a copy. While this is focused towards the military, it is important to understand jargon exists in all agencies and organizations. I see your hand, Christopher, 1 second. And what one agency calls a skill or is looking for could be called something completely different in another. That's why, even as a current federal employee or employees on the call, that you write your resume in a clear, easy to understand terms. We'll go forward here in a second and give some examples from our guide for the military folks on the call. Christopher, go ahead with your question.
Sorry, I don't mean to back it up. I just had a question on the references. Usually that's like separate documents. Are you saying to attach the references to the resume and HR will understand that that's covered for the references document later on, or?
Yes, but with a caveat. Always make sure you read the entire announcement. That's always going to be my default. They will tell you when and where they want their references, if they want them separately or outside your resume. However, that's also an opportunity for resumes that are pushing that 5-page limit, and you want to make sure you include all of your qualifications. Maybe that's where you put references available on request. However, personally, I like including at least 3 references in my resume. So again, when that HR person, they don't have to wait for me to send them anything to continue on the hiring process.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, just based on we'll do a couple of things here. We've all heard it, and I've said it here several times. Your resume must be written in language that the HR resume reviewers understand. The person reviewing the resume probably has no idea what the job is looking for, let alone what you did in the military. They're only being told what to review and how to do it. The likelihood that an HR reviewer understands what you did in the military is probably in the 1% range. This is why your resume must clearly state how you meet the qualifications for the position in terms the HR reviewers and managers understand. Again, here are some examples. Again, military experience is professional experience. MOSs are career fields. Missions are nothing more than projects. Some more examples from our guide. This bottom one is one of my favorites, close air support of CAS. What could be a way to translate that very specific military term into something federal HR specialists understand? Anybody? How would you write that? How about this? Customer service. I'm sure some of you are laughing, but let's look at the mosaic definition of customer service. Works with clients and customers, that is, any individuals who use or receive the services or products that your work unit produces, including the general public, individuals who work in the agency, other agencies or organizations outside the government, to assess their needs, provide information or assistance, resolve their problems, or satisfy their expectations, knows about available products and services, is committed to providing quality products and services. Seems to me like this translation hits pretty close. From my time in Iraq, close air support absolutely solved some of my problems. Just a couple more. Don't want to refer to subordinates. You want to talk about employees, personnel, workers, combat, high stress operations, conflict, hazardous conditions, in support of national strategic objectives. Brigade is organization of 2,000 plus personnel. You don't have soldiers, you don't have sailors, you have employees, you have personnel, you have DOD employees, Department of Defense employees, Department of the Army employees, Department of the Navy employees. Department of the Navy is a federal government agency. Sorry, Marines, the USMC and US Navy are not. As we get closer to the end of our context matters. Explain what you did, how you did it, and if it made a difference. If it's not in your resume, then you didn't do it. Only include relevant information. For every bullet in your resume, ask yourself, so what? What is its purpose? How does it strengthen your resume and or reflect the specialized experience the announcement is looking for? Again, if it is not in your resume, then you didn't do it. Referring back to a question earlier, I recommend you create one master resume as a foundation and then use copies of that to tailor for each announcement. A master resume allows you to put everything, all of your experiences, no matter the job series, no matter the MOS or background, in one single document. So that way it's all standing by and you can cut it up. Up front, and this isn't a humble brag, my master federal resume is 30 pages long. Don't think that's anything crazy, but I'm very anal retentive. I like spacing. I like being able to read things. So it's a lot longer than it probably needs to be. So if and when I do apply to a job, which I don't because my supervisor is currently on this call and I love working for her, my resumes will usually be in the 8 to 12 page range, excuse me. Next, state the facts. Do not exaggerate. But if you don't know, make sure you guess so you do the best guess so you can get the credit that you deserve. Avoid jargon and militarisms. And this is, again, isn't just for the vets. This is also important for current federal employees, government contractors who are trying to transfer agencies or applying for a position in a different career field. Next, use acronyms sparingly, if at all, and be sure to spell them out at least once. Go back as far as you need to in order to show you have the experience and qualifications the announcement is looking for. Next, find a mentor, pick their brain. There are some great private organizations out there, and the Interagency Veterans Advisory Council, or IVAC, is working on one specifically for veterans and military spouses. Finally, your resume must be clear. HR reviewers will not make any assumptions about your experience. If it is not in your resume, it did not happen. In closing, take a look at a couple of links. Building your federal resume, some additional resources. I referenced the OPM published videos on YouTube. They have resume writing, communicating qualifications, experience. The NIH has a competency dictionary, much like the Mosaic. It has a couple of additional terms in it, but they all meet the same terms. The bottom is a link to the Mosaic. on the OPM website. You can also find this on any web search just by going to OPM competencies and it'll pop right up. Links to the joint service transcript, VMET, as well as information on veterans preference and veteran special hiring authorities. As discussed, there are many different ways to do it. Department of Energy and the FBI both have resume guides on their websites, including things they like to see and formats they like to have. I have never used a cover letter. However, the IRS and the USDA do have pretty in-depth guides on how to set those up and examples. Again, Homeland Security Investigations is hiring and will be announcing an entry-level opportunity aimed at hiring more women into the agency. When looking for HSI positions, look for keywords such as 1811 or criminal investigator. This particular announcement is aimed at the GS 5 to 7 level and will hit USA Jobs on the 22nd of August. HSI, Homeland Security Investigations, is listed under the Department of Homeland Security. To learn more about, I don't know why I missed that, so sorry in advance that I've got that covered, but to learn more about the following West Coast virtual webinars, there's another job information session happening this Saturday, August 19th at 5 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. Pacific. This little thing, whatever the short URL is right there. If not, I will send it out later for anybody who missed it. This concludes the resume development portion of our webinar. This is my contact information. When you have a moment, please take the time to shoot me some comments on how you thought my presentation went today, how I can make it better, etc. Your feedback is important to make future webinars even more effective. If you utilize the QR code, it will go ahead and dump all of my contact information as well as the website information for the San Francisco Federal Executive Board into your phone. So it's a great thing. I am finally joined the 21st century. So I will pause. I will end that. And what are your questions? We will start off with Autumn. Go for it.
Yeah, so I have a quick question about the age requirements. So it says that you have to be 21, but I was wondering if it was by the time that you submit your application or if it's like before, like if you go through the entire hiring process and then they offer you a position, if you have to be 21 by that time.
I will let Dr. Jenkins answer that question. He is the man.
So the age limit is 37 unless you served on active duty. Then there is no age requirement as long as you can finish 20 years of service and you can pass the assessments. So I don't know where 21 came from, but 37 is definitely the age cutoff unless you have honorable military service time.
I think she's referring to the earliest age, the youngest you can be. The other end of the spectrum, not where we're at.
Got it.
Yeah, just because I'm currently 20, but I'll be 21 in like 2 months. So I was just wondering.
You're
if
fine.
that would...
You're fine.
Okay.
Yeah, you're
okay,
fine.
Perfect. All right.
As long as you're 21 by the time you're given a tentative selective letter.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Who else? All right, David Gonzalez, go ahead.
Hey, Brock. So I'm currently on a skill bridge, so I'm trying to soak my brain with as much information as I can. So what kind of implications should I be aware of potentially applying to federal positions while I am still in skill bridge, and or should I wait until I get my DD 214 with a disability, because that will put me higher in certain areas of the federal employment sector?
Okay, I'm gonna pause actually right there. Are you doing a skill bridge with a federal agency? Actually, you know what? It doesn't matter. If you're doing a skill bridge, you're currently active duty, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so there's a couple things you can do now to be applying now. Most federal agencies try to limit people who can apply up to 120 days from their ETS or transition date. So ETS, retirement, EAS, whatever you want to call it. So the time, you know, today you're military, tomorrow you're Joe civilian. They want to be 120 days from that point. If you're still pending your DD-214, as many military branches do, for instance, I know the Army did not kick me my DD-214 until I was done with my skill bridge and the day before I started my terminal leave. Then what? What you do and what you need is what they call a statement of service. There is a format on opm.gov. Just do OPM statement of service. It'll pop it up. You have that signed by your commander at whatever level you work at. And that basically states it's what you use in lieu of a DD-214 while applying to federal jobs that you will need a federal, so that you'll need a DD-214. So that gives you the veteran's preference. That allows you to apply under the VRA. That allows you to apply using the VEOA. So you notice I didn't say 30% or more disabled veteran. That's because as an active duty service member, you are not considered a veteran yet. And you will not get your veteran or your disability rating until you're out of the service. Benefits on discharge, those kinds of programs. But that won't happen until after the fact. So what do you do now while you're active duty, while you're applying? I was in the same boat. My first federal job I got on the strength of my resume and interview alone because I didn't know what hiring authorities I was eligible for. I wasn't out of the service yet, so I didn't get my 30%. I was applying to higher than GS11, so I couldn't use the VRA. The VEOA just allowed me to compete. So my resume had to be awesome. Fast forward a couple of months, I've got my 30%, or more, 100%. Thank you. Now, so what does that mean? Come to find out, anything that would get you more than 30% disability from the VA would probably also entitle you to a Schedule A or individual with disability special hiring authority. Why is this important? The Schedule A hiring authority, all it requires is a letter, and you can use that while you're on active duty applying because it is not tied to your veteran status. It is applied to whatever medical conditions you have. Now, for those of you on the call, you're probably like me. You don't like hearing disabled or you don't like using those terms. I'm relatively fit. I'm vertical most of the time. Dispel that, to get that out of your head. Look up the SF form 256. It is a self-statement of disabilities that you will fill out for most agencies. Anything on that form, if you have it diagnosed in your medical records, anything on that form, you are eligible for a Schedule A appointment. Now we're talking the biggies, obviously coming from the military, amputations, bullet wounds, things like that. But we're also talking things that many people have: anxiety, depression, PTSD, but also IBS, GERD, plantar fasciitis. All of those things would make you eligible for a Schedule A hiring authority. Thing about all you need is a letter signed by a medical professional or a treating medical professional or a medical professional that has knowledge of your medical issues. Or I found out recently a Department of Veterans Affairs vocational rehabilitation counselor can sign your Schedule A letter. Get that, start applying. You can be hired while you're on terminal leave and start working before you're even out of the service.
Awesome. Thanks, Brock.
Adriana, yes, this will be recorded. It will be shared. However, because I didn't have a list of emails on this one, I do ask that you refer and check on LinkedIn, on our San Francisco Federal Executive Board LinkedIn, as well as our San Francisco Federal Executive Board YouTube channel. That's where this recording and transcription will be posted. Any other?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Yes, so I took a break in between school and work. How do I reflect that on my resume? The reason why I took a break, it was because I needed to focus on my health and my medical conditions that I was facing at that time. And how do I reflect that? Do I have to go in details as to what conditions I was facing? Or can I just briefly state something very general and that is it?
You could state something very general. There is a PII, PHI requirement for applications. Ultimately, all you have to say is, yes, I was taking care of a loved one, or I was medically recuperating from whatever. It doesn't even, and literally that's all you have to say. It's a lot of it. A lot of it is just answering potential questions instead of having a 1 to 4 year gap in your employment experience. Like a lot of people will have because of COVID. You were at home taking care of family. You were convalescent. You were going to school. You were, taking care of, whatever. But I will say, especially if you're taking care of someone, taking care of yourself, things like that, there's a lot there that you could add to. You ran budgets, you made sure you're attended to detail, especially if you were taking care of a loved one and they required medication. There are ways to articulate what you did and show that you have competencies and skills and you utilize those competencies and skills during that period. So it's not just, I want to say, wasted time, but it's still time you can utilize towards qualifying your resume.
I got it. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I have a question
Nice.
about my title for my job in the Navy.
Okay, go ahead.
So I was an aviation machinist mate, but not everybody knows what a machinist mate is. Would I put aviation mechanic?
You could, yes, aviation mechanics. So you think less about, so in the military, we're all wrapped up in titles and ranks and all that stuff. Think
Right.
less about what your title was and think about your level of responsibility. Think about
Okay.
and what you did. So were you a senior aircraft mechanic or were you more of an entry? Or did you teach other people? Were you an aircraft mechanic team lead? Things like
Yeah,
that.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Who is next? And for everybody, Jenkins, no, you don't need to have been in the. Oh no, you don't need. Okay, I was answering. Dr. Jenkins already answered that. So no, Schedule A is not a military specific hiring authority. It is open to anybody with a medical condition. So it is a great one for anybody. There you go. Hey, I like Dr. Jenkins is on point. So all that right there can and probably should be included in your master resume. Whether it's included in every job announcement depends on what's relevant. Any other questions? Thank you, Jonathan. Appreciate that.
Yeah, Brock. If I'm willing to shoot you an email about my current resume, are you willing to even look over that, or
Absolutely. Anybody,
can you get
again,
feedback with that, or?
yes, anybody who would like a second set of eyes on your federal resume, I do state this up front. I do not write resumes. I do not recommend you pay anybody to write resumes. The best person to write your resume is you. You're the one that has the most knowledge and experience with your life. So yes, I absolutely send it over. Usually you can get to it in a couple of business days. And then, if you've got it dialed in and you think it's pretty good, send the resume. Feel free to send your resume over with an announcement URL, and I'll compare the two. It's pretty simple on how to do it. Anybody can look and say, okay, well, you don't have the information. You need to make it stronger. Don't hold your breath on this one. Keep applying, kind of thing. But yeah, feel free to send it over.
I have another